September 29, 1913. The SS Dresden cuts through the North Sea on its overnight voyage from Antwerp to Harwich, England, carrying passengers on what should have been a routine journey. In cabin 36, Rudolf Diesel's bed remains untouched. His nightshirt lies folded on the pillow. His watch sits on the nightstand, still ticking. But the man who revolutionized the world's engines has vanished without a trace. 10 days later, the crew of the Danish steamer Kertsen near Vlissingen found a body floating in the North Sea. They recovered a wallet, a knife, and an eyeglass case, items that Eugen Diesel and his assistant later identified as his father's, though the body itself was too decomposed for confirmation. Finding no means of preservation, the crew buried the body at sea per maritime practice, leaving behind one of engineering history's greatest mysteries. This is the story of Rudolf Diesel, a man whose obsession with perfect efficiency created the engine that powers our modern world, and whose death remains as enigmatic as his genius was undeniable. Born in Paris on March 18, 1858, to German craftsman Theodor Diesel and his wife Elise, who had emigrated from Bavaria seeking better prospects, Rudolf Christian Karl Diesel spent his early years in a France that would soon turn hostile to Germans. When the Franco-Prussian War erupted in 1870, rising anti-German sentiment forced the family to leave France. 12-year-old Rudolf fled to London, where he stayed with relatives before rejoining his family later that year in Augsburg, Germany. This early upheaval shaped Diesel's worldview. He witnessed firsthand how ordinary people suffered when powerful forces, whether nations or monopolies, controlled their fate. It was a lesson that would drive his later obsession with democratizing power itself. At the Royal Bavarian Polytechnic in Munich, Diesel discovered his calling under Professor Carl von Linde, a pioneer in refrigeration and thermodynamics. Linde introduced him to the Carnot cycle, the theoretical framework describing how heat engines convert thermal energy into mechanical work. For most students, it was abstract theory. For Diesel, it became an obsession. The young engineer calculated that existing steam engines captured only 6 to 10% of their fuel's energy. The rest vanished as waste heat, lost to the atmosphere in great billowing clouds. It was, to Diesel's methodical mind, an engineering tragedy of staggering proportions. Diesel spent countless hours with his slide rule, calculating the theoretical limits of various power sources. The finest coreless steam engines, pride of American industry, achieved up to 15% efficiency under ideal conditions. Most factory engines performed far worse, wasting the vast majority of their coal's energy as useless heat that warmed nothing but the sky. This violated everything Diesel understood about thermodynamics. The Carnot cycle proved that heat engines could theoretically achieve much higher efficiencies if they operated between greater temperature differences. Steam engines were limited by the boiling point of water and the practical constraints of boiler pressure. But what if an engine could create its own high temperatures through compression alone? What if combustion occurred at pressures and temperatures that made steam look primitive by comparison? These calculations consumed Diesel's thoughts. He filled notebook after notebook with thermal efficiency equations, comparing the theoretical potential of various engine cycles. The waste he witnessed in industrial steam plants became a personal affront to his engineering sensibilities. Steam engines dominated the 1880s industrial landscape, but they were monsters of inefficiency. A typical factory steam plant required a massive boiler house, coal storage facilities, water treatment systems, and a small army of stokers working around the clock. The engines themselves were enormous, some weighing dozens of tons, yet delivered relatively modest power output. Worse still, steam technology favored large operations. Only major manufacturers could afford the infrastructure. Small workshops, rural mills, and independent farmers remained locked out of mechanized power, forced to rely on muscle, wind, or water wheels that hadn't changed fundamentally since medieval times. At first, Diesel's pursuit was purely scientific, maximizing efficiency, but over time it evolved into a broader social mission, democratizing access to power. In his 1893 treatise, Theorie und Konstruktion eines rationellen Wärmemotors, Diesel outlined his vision of an engine so efficient and compact that any farmer or craftsman could afford to own and operate one, though the massive engines of his era would serve factories and ships for decades before that dream became practical. But first, he had to build it. Diesel's breakthrough insight came from studying the Carnot cycle's theoretical limits. His design relied on air blast fuel injection, using compressed air to atomize fuel, so combustion would occur from heat of compression alone, eliminating the need for spark plugs, hot tubes, or flame ignition systems that plagued early internal combustion engines. The mathematics were elegant, the reality proved nearly fatal. In 1893, Diesel partnered with Maschinenfabrik Augsburg, with later support from Krupp, to build his first prototype. The company's engineers were skeptical, but intrigued enough to fund the experiment. What followed were 4 years of spectacular failures that nearly killed both Diesel and his dream. The first test engine exploded violently, injuring Diesel and leaving him partially deaf and temporarily blinded. Company executives demanded he abandon the project. Diesel refused. He rebuilt the engine with heavier components, thicker cylinder walls, and more robust fuel injection systems. The second prototype ran briefly before seizing completely, its pistons welded solid by excessive heat. The third attempt produced such violent vibrations that it shook the entire factory building. Between each failure, Diesel obsessively adjusted compression ratios and fuel injection timing, searching for the precise balance between power and destruction. By late 1896, a prototype finally ran smoothly for a sustained test under load, producing steady power without the violent vibrations that had plagued earlier attempts. But just as success seemed within reach, a mechanical failure seized the engine. The near success haunted him through the winter of 1896 to 97, yet with renewed determination, he redesigned the fuel system and key components for greater robustness. Each failure taught Diesel something new about compression ratios, fuel injection timing, and combustion chamber design. But the constant setbacks took their toll. His diary reveals exhaustion and self-doubt, writing of the torture of these experiments, and fearing he pursued an impossible ideal. He would spend 18-hour days in the workshop, emerging covered in oil and soot, muttering calculations under his breath. His wife Martha Diesel watched him grow gaunt and obsessive, while friends worried he was losing his sanity along with his health. The engineering community began to mock Diesel's efforts. Established manufacturers dismissed his compression ignition concept as thermodynamically impossible. Trade journals published scathing critiques of his theoretical fantasies. Even some of his own financial backers started demanding their money back. But by early 1897, a refined prototype at Maschinenfabrik Augsburg ran continuously under load tests with record-breaking efficiency, over 26%. More importantly, it delivered on his efficiency promises. Diesel's prototype achieved more than triple the performance of steam. The engine ran on heavy oil, a cheap petroleum distillate rather than refined gasoline. It needed no external ignition system, no complex valve timing, and no separate boiler. The entire power plant consisted of a single compact unit that could be operated by one person with minimal training. Word of Diesel's success spread rapidly through European industrial circles. Orders began pouring in from manufacturers who had previously dismissed his work. But Diesel had bigger plans than simply replacing steam engines in existing factories. At the 1900 Paris Exposition, a French-built diesel engine based on Diesel's design ran successfully on peanut oil, illustrating his claim that such fuels could power his invention. The crowd watched in amazement as the engine operated flawlessly hour after hour, consuming nothing but vegetable oil and producing smooth, reliable power. The demonstration drew engineers from across Europe and America. Many had come expecting to witness another inventor's folly, but instead found themselves observing a machine that challenged fundamental assumptions about power generation. Technical journals across Europe reported on the demonstration in enthusiastic terms, and engineers who had been skeptical now published detailed analyses of the engine's performance. Manufacturers from Germany, France, and Britain sent representatives to study the technology firsthand. Observers even began to speculate that a single crop could, in principle, supply enough oil to power an entire farm's operations. Diesel later wrote, "The use of vegetable oils as engine fuels may become as important as petroleum products. envisioning energy independence for farmers who could grow their own fuel, pressing oil from peanuts, soybeans, or sunflower seeds. Rural communities could achieve energy independence, breaking free from coal monopolies and urban power grids. This wasn't just engineering innovation, it was economic revolution. European adoption of diesel technology accelerated rapidly after the Paris demonstration. Within a decade, German shipbuilders began experimenting with diesel engines for submarines, technology that would soon define conventional submarine propulsion and later play a major role in naval warfare. French manufacturers used diesel power for textile mills and machine shops. Diesel power spread through European factories and ships, though rail applications would come years later. Meanwhile, coal and shipping interests had reasons to see diesel engines as a threat to established fuel and power arrangements. Oil companies and policymakers could easily have viewed widespread adoption of vegetable fuels and decentralized power as unsettling to existing energy systems. Regardless of any high-level tensions, Diesel continued publishing essays about the social benefits of distributed power generation, arguing that his engines could counter the tendency for industrial wealth and power to concentrate in a few hands. His writings evolved from technical discussions of engine efficiency into broader arguments about economic and social reform. He warned against the concentration of economic power in a few large concerns and argued for more solidaristic, cooperative forms of industrial organization. In his 1912 work, Solidarismus, he sketched ideas for a fairer industrial order, views that made many conservative businessmen deeply uncomfortable. By 1913, though royalties had made him wealthy, investment losses and legal disputes left him financially overextended. His health remained fragile from years of experimental injuries and stress. Even longtime associates such as Carl von Linde and Adolphus Busch grew more cautious about his increasingly outspoken views. The man who had once been hailed simply as a technical genius was now seen in some circles as uncomfortably radical. On September 29, 1913, Diesel boarded the SS Dresden in Antwerp bound for Harwich. He was reportedly planning to discuss industrial and possibly naval licensing deals with British manufacturers, potentially lucrative agreements that could solve his financial problems. His traveling companions later reported that Diesel seemed unusually subdued during dinner. He spoke little, picked at his food, and retired to his cabin earlier than usual. They assumed he was simply tired from the journey. The next morning, Cabin 36 told a different story. Diesel's bed remained perfectly made. His personal effects lay undisturbed on the dresser. His hat and overcoat hung in the wardrobe. But Rudolf Diesel had vanished as completely as if he had never existed. The ship's crew conducted an exhaustive search. They examined every cabin, storage compartment, and public area. They questioned passengers and staff. They found no trace of the missing inventor, no sign of struggle, no indication of what had happened during the night. 3 theories emerged to explain Diesel's disappearance, each supported by circumstantial evidence, but none definitively proven. The theory that he had taken his own life pointed to Diesel's deteriorating mental health and mounting financial pressures. His diary entries from 1913 revealed deep depression and anxiety about his business ventures. He had recently suffered significant losses in failed investments and faced potential financial ruin despite his patent income. Some historians argue that the stress of financial troubles, combined with his history of mental health struggles, drove him to take his own life. The accident theory suggested that Diesel, known for his habit of taking late-night walks on ship decks, simply fell overboard in darkness. The North Sea's rough waters and strong currents could easily have swept away a man who slipped on wet decking. This explanation required no conspiracy or deliberate action, just a tragic moment of carelessness. But the murder theory has persisted for over a century, fueled by the timing of Diesel's disappearance and speculation about powerful interests threatened by his technology. Proponents speculate that coal and oil interests might have viewed him as a threat to established energy markets. Diesel's ongoing efforts to license his technology, including to firms with military connections, added a layer of international intrigue as European powers armed themselves for what would become World War I. What remains undisputed is the revolutionary impact of Diesel's invention. Within a few decades, diesel engines powered ships, locomotives, and trucks worldwide, fulfilling Diesel's vision of efficient industrial power. The engine's efficiency advantages proved even more dramatic than Diesel had predicted. Modern diesel engines reach thermal efficiencies above 40%, roughly 4 times higher than the best steam engines of his era. This efficiency translated directly into economic advantage. Diesel-powered ships could carry more cargo over longer distances, diesel locomotives could haul heavier trains up steeper grades, and diesel trucks could transport goods more cheaply than any previous technology. Diesel's vision of agricultural energy independence took longer to realize, but still proved prophetic in principle. During World War II, fuel shortages spurred experiments with alternative diesel fuels, including some vegetable oil and synthetic substitutes, echoing aspects of Diesel's early ideas. Decades later, countries such as Brazil expanded large-scale renewable fuel programs, and modern biodiesel development follows the same fundamental concept he highlighted with peanut oil in 1900. The military applications that Diesel's engine soon found became a critical part of 20th century warfare's logistics and naval power. Diesel-powered submarines played a central role in naval combat in both world wars. Diesel generators provided reliable power for remote military installations. Diesel engines powered countless trucks, ships, and generators that sustained the massive logistics of global conflicts. Perhaps most importantly, diesel technology democratized heavy transportation in exactly the way Diesel had envisioned. Independent truckers could afford to own and operate their own vehicles. Small shipping companies could compete with established lines. Rural communities gained access to reliable freight service that connected them to distant markets. The transformation of American railroads proved particularly dramatic. In the 1930s, steam locomotives still dominated U.S. freight service, just as they had for nearly a century. But the introduction of diesel-electric locomotives by Electromotive Division set in motion a rapid shift that would soon change everything. By 1940, EMD's FT freight locomotive proved that diesels could handle heavy freight service more efficiently than steam. The FT units required no water stops, produced instant power without lengthy warm-up periods, and could operate in multiple unit consists controlled by a single engineer. Railroad executives quickly realized that diesel power could eliminate the massive infrastructure required for steam operations. Water towers, coaling facilities, roundhouses, and the armies of mechanics needed to maintain steam locomotives. The conversion accelerated after World War II. Railroads that had operated steam for generations began scrapping their fleets at a remarkable pace, completing the transition to diesel within 2 decades. The Pennsylvania Railroad, once the world's largest steam operator, retired its last steam locomotive in 1957. The Norfolk and Western, which had built some of the most advanced steam locomotives ever designed, retired its last regular steam operations around 1960. By 1970, steam had virtually disappeared from American railroads, replaced entirely by diesel power that traced its lineage directly back to Rudolf Diesel's compression ignition concept. The irony is inescapable. Rudolf Diesel died just as his invention was beginning to reshape the modern world. He never saw diesel locomotives revolutionize rail transport, never witnessed diesel ships dominate global commerce, never experienced the vindication of his belief that compression ignition engines would transform human civilization. His death remains one of engineering history's most enduring mysteries. Was he a victim of his own despair, a casualty of maritime accident, or a target of industrial assassination? The North Sea keeps its secrets, and Rudolf Diesel's final moments remain as enigmatic as the man himself.